welcome to Chop Shop Motors. My name is Clay, and I'd like to bring you along on another episode of the 30-day truck build where we try to piece together a 55 F100. So in this section, this little session, might be a little shorter. We are going to look at some of the prep that is required to put this bed back together and kind of make it into a functioning, usable bed. It's got some pretty bad areas. So I'm going to show you some of the pieces that I've worked on kind of behind the scenes and show you the bed, and probably set the camera up and let you just watch as I kind of patch some pieces together. Not a terribly in-depth video today, just because it's an evening in the week and it's already kind of late. So let's see if we can make a little progress and show you some of the stuff we're working on to make this bed usable, and then hopefully we can get a little help and get the bed set on in the next, I don't know, week. So let's take a look at what we have in front of us. Part of the work in doing something like this is finding enough hardware to piece it all back together. So if this was, a project that was getting full paint and body work and really a true restoration or hot rod, none of these old bolts we would even think about. We would be looking at all new hardware. But for this truck, I want to use as much of the original hardware as possible, and some will find that to be a surprise, and then others would be like, oh, it's just so much easier to use all new hardware. And I agree, it is easier, but it's probably more expensive, and it's kind of not the challenge here. So these are the bolts that came out of the bed I'm going to show you, and they're pretty rough. I cleaned them up. I took a dye to them and I chased the threads, and what I'd like to do is use as many of the original bolts as I can. I also have washers, lock washers, and 5/16 National Fine nuts that I still have to chase the threads on the nuts. It takes quite a few to put the fenders and the running boards and the bed together, so I won't have enough, but I have some, and I'll buy some new. I also have some used from the bolt bin carriage bolts to also augment putting that bed together. They're national course, but they'll work fine for this project. So these are some of the things that take a bit of time, both getting them apart and also cleaning them up so you can reuse them. Then there's also the bracket that was pretty hammered, and it's been had the extra pieces taken off of it, and we'll use it, and I mean, it'll be fine. It needs one more little weld on it, and then it'll get used. So that's the front cross member. It has these funny little brackets here for the front bed bolts to go through, so we absolutely have to have it, and I'll weld that up probably tonight and it'll be ready to go, and then I'll show you some of the other pieces. So here is one of the running boards. I took just a wire wheel to it and cleaned off the really scaly rust and put it in some red oxide primer. It was the one that was actually on the parts truck, and if you see some of the early videos, the whole back end of it was bent down, and it looked, it was really pretty haggard looking, as most of the pieces are. But it will be fine for this truck. It's straightened out. It's actually not a bad running board. It's got some damage that would need to be fixed to make it a nice one for a nice truck, but it's super healthy. So that's the running board for the right side. And then this is the running board. This is the running board for the left side. So it looks pretty decent kind of at a glance. It's definitely, if I can get enough light on it, it's definitely worse than the other one. It's much rustier. It's got some bad areas that have been fixed. It would be a lot harder to use it for a really nice truck. Totally doable, but it's straighter, but it's crustier. And so I primered the bottom and the top of it. It will fill the bill just fine for this truck. So those are a couple things that have happened since the last video. These are the cross members. These came out of the homely bed. That one's going to get a little bit of attention and get straightened just a little bit. There's the other one. Those are lined up in the original cross member holes in the frame, and so that's where we're going to put it. And then over here is the bed. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to put a piece in this front, and I'm going to just make it so that it's the integrity is back in there, so that I can put a piece of plywood in the bottom of the bed. The bed is, you know, at a glance it doesn't look horrible. The bed sides are probably savable with some work for a decent truck. The header is garbage, so Brookville sells a new header, and I could definitely put a new header on it at some point if that was the direction. I also have the header off the other bed that I did buy a Brookville header for, and that header makes this one is much nicer than this one, so we could use it as well. As you look down the side, it's got a couple of the bolts broken off that will fix, and then I've pulled all the bolts out of it that mount it. It's late, it's dark, and I'm sorry, the camera work probably isn't that great, but there's really no details that are super noteworthy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on building this front piece, and then I'll show you kind of what that looks like. It really won't take that much to get this bed ready for what I'm going to do with it, and that is put a piece of plywood in it and bolt it all down. I'll probably paint the plywood first. I've got a piece to put in it just to protect it, but other than that it should be pretty quick. So let me make some dust. Well, let me get you caught up on what I've discovered as I spent a little time out in the shop. So I straightened out the cross members, got them, so put them in the press, took the big Yahoo out of them, so now those will work. They seem to line up fine. So far so good. Then I welded up, get over here in the dark, I welded up the front cross member piece that came out of the front of the bed. Okay, not a big deal. Looks like it's going to be fine until I put it up here just to do the first test fit. And the big bolts don't line up with where the little brackets are. Let's see if you can see that. So there's the hole for the bracket, and there's where the bolt should go through. So I'm like, well, what do you think about that? So then I start looking at all the clues. This bed was on the truck and didn't have any fenders on it. Some fenders came in the back. Okay. If I looked at the side of the truck, which you probably could see it, there's some pictures of some other stuff, some other videos that have a side shot of the bed. You'll notice that the line of the fender where it was painted on the truck you can distinctly see the line of the original fender, and it comes down, if I can get it, it comes down like right here in this bumper. And I'm like, that's so weird. I wonder why the bumper didn't fit that, you know, that fender. I wonder what was going on. So I didn't think enough about it. No big deal. And so I'm messing around, and I see this front cross member is not right. And so I go and get a fender and see how the fender fits on all the studs, and it doesn't. So now I start really looking to see what I have. And what I think I have is probably a 48 to 52 bed. I've had one of those trucks. I had a 50 and I had a 48, and if I'm not mistaken, they had a metal floor in them. So this might be a 51 or 2 bed. But I'm kind of making a shot in the dark. If I'm not mistaken, those fenders go way to the end of the bed, now that I think about it. And that's just like what this bed has. So dimensionally, overall dimension, it should work. But I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna get it up on the truck and set some running boards up there and make sure that width-wise it works. Although I know width-wise it'll work because I have that nasty looking tailgate over there leaning up against the race car trailer, and it will fit the opening. So the width is right and the rear mount works. So I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I think the bed is gonna work still. What it means, though, what I've been playing with, is the fender will have to get remounted in the right place for a 53 to 5 or 53 to 6. And so I've marked it up pretty close to where I think it's supposed to be based on the running board and just, you know, by gosh and by golly. And so, I'm sorry, I got the camera's probably pointing up at the sky. So what I'm going to have to do, at least at this, I'm going to sleep on it, but probably what I'll have to do is I'll drill the fenders, because the fenders are rough. It's not like they're a set of cherry fenders. I'll drill the fenders where the studs are in the bed for the ones that are at least in alignment with the fender. This one's pretty close. This one would drill into it. This one would catch the fender. All the way back, even that one would catch the fender. I don't know if you can see it or not. See if you can see it one right. My arm's in the light right about there. So I could catch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the bolts in the bed would work. And then I'd have to drill 1, 2, 3, 4 at the front and 3 at the back. So 7 I'd have to drill into it. And I'd have to cut the other bolts off and get them out of the way. The other thing I'd have to do is cut this piece off here. Again, I'm looking at it, I'm not pointing the camera. This piece, I have to cut a piece of this off, it's in the way, and it doesn't fit dimensionally. And at the back, see if we're out of reach. At the back, there's an extra little piece I'm going to have to fit in there and finesse, which is probably not that big a deal, quite honestly. A couple quick bends, and we're there. So that was the news for the night. So the beds turned out to be a little more work. I was really just wanting to bolt it together, and that's not what's going to happen. So that's probably it for this segment, probably this video. I'll bring you back when I figure out what I'm going to do round 2, but for now that's probably it. I'm Clay for Chop Shop Motors, and we'll see you on the next project.